We did it. We're live. I'm catching up. I'm catching up with Jason Falls today. And I'm a little quiet because I have my kids over and they're sleeping still because it's Vince's 18th birthday. So you better sleep in on your 18th birthday. Jason, it's been a minute since you and I have shaken hands anywhere in person. A few years at least, right?
It's been a while. I'm not sure if I really even remember the last time I saw you in person.
You know, we are in the same orbits a lot of time, but not always super, we almost like two ships passing a lot of times. But you filter into two of my favorite experiences in my business career ever. One is the one I always like to talk about, which is the first time we met. And then the other one is the one I'll start with this time, which is going to Maker's Mark Distillery in Loretto, Kentucky, where we sat with assistant brewmaster Denny Potts. I can still remember his name. That's how much this trip meant to me. And we got to do everything, put our hands in the mash and mush around some Maker's Mark and learn all about it. What a life-changing experience that was. And you brought that to me. You're still in that space. You're still kind of in and around spirits and in and around helping brands down in Lexington and around Kentucky. Talk a little bit about where you are right now.
Yeah, so that was a great experience. It is Denny Potter, by the way, just so you know.
Potter? I've always said Potts.
And he's now the master distiller at Maker's Mark after going to a couple other places, but he's now
the apprentice has become the master.
Yeah, so you had a private tour with the man. Didn't even realize it. But yeah, so I'm at Cornet now, which is an agency, full service agency in Lexington, Kentucky. And we deal with a lot of national and even international, brands, a lot of which are geographically located close to us. But at the same time, one of the brands that we work with are the Sazerac bourbons and Wheatley vodka, which come out of the Buffalo Trace Distillery. So a competitor of Maker's Mark. My Maker's Mark days were at Doe Anderson about 12, 13 years ago.
Right.
But the Buffalo Trace Distillery, produces things like Buffalo Trace bourbon, which is this thing right over here. 1792 is a Sazerac brand that's produced down at the Barton Distillery in Bardstown. But the Buffalo Trace Distillery also produces Eagle Rare, Blanton's, Pappy Van Winkle, Weller, E.H. Taylor. So a lot of the hard to find elite brands of bourbon that people are constantly saying, man, I can't find this, or, I really want to get my hands on a bottle of that. A lot of them come out of the Buffalo Trace Distillery. So it's an interesting and good problem to have when you don't have enough supply. But they're doing things to correct that so that these brands can be more available. And, I get to sort of, work with them on all their digital and social things.
Yeah, to me, it's a scarcity in spirits is kind of a rarity, except if we're talking things like champagne and all that. But, talking about things like Pappy and whatnot, you're going to get that. By the way, this Stephen Brogan character with the beard, he likes yours. Evidently.
Well, I modeled it after his, actually. I'm working on it. I'm not quite down to here, but I'm getting there. So
Steve Garfield from stevegarfield.com says, hi, Buffalo Trace is delicious. I have the last 15th of a bottle of it still in my in my cupboard. Quarantine's been really good for my sampling.
Yeah,
and that is a fine product just to sip and enjoy. And
the only thing that's profited in my quarantine is my liver. My liver's done a good job of getting its fill.
One thing you told me when I was down in Loretto for that Maker's tour, which I'm sure is what do you call it down there? It's like, similar to like the way they do the wine country up in California. What's your thing called?
So we have the Kentucky Bourbon Trail, which ironically enough, the Buffalo Trace Distillery is not an official member.
Right.
It's a marketing thing, but it's there. And the Buffalo Trace Distillery is the largest distillery tour and has the most diverse array of brands. But, the Buffalo Trace or the Kentucky Bourbon Trail includes most of the distilleries throughout central Kentucky, Lexington, Louisville, Frankfort, Lawrenceburg, et cetera. But then there's also in Louisville now, they started something called the Urban Bourbon Trail, because a lot of distilleries have opened up sort of micro stills and locations on Main Street in downtown Louisville. So the bourbon industry, until this whole travel, thing happened with COVID, was really booming, and it's going to, be booming again once people get back out there. So it's been a really fun decade to be in Kentucky, because the industry, which has been around forever and has supported the economy here for a long time, is really becoming a big thing internationally. And so that's good for the Commonwealth.
Is there this is just me dreaming for a minute. I don't know what made me just think about this, but it's like Fred Willard, when he would do those commentaries, he'd be like, wouldn't it be great if they put the little dogs with like a Sherlock Holmes hat? You mentioned the urban bourbon. Would there be a benefit to throwing just even a few micro stills downtown from places like Buffalo Trace? I mean, wouldn't that kind of spice it up a little to add a little downtown Louisville?
Absolutely. And some like Evan Williams has done that. Old Forester has now done that. The Michter's Distillery now has a downtown location in Louisville. So Angel's Envy's entire operation is now on Main Street in Louisville. So there's a lot of distilleries that are capitalizing on that sort of urban tourism, revitalization of cities kind of thing. And so I don't know, I haven't heard any talk yet of Buffalo Trace having those kind of plans, but I can't imagine that someone isn't talking about it internally.
Well, if they contact somebody over at Cornet, maybe they'll get some good ideas to get on in there.
I'd like for them to put one on Main Street in Lexington, Kentucky, about right there. I would love that. That would be a nice lunchtime activity, although I'd probably get in a lot of trouble if there was a distillery.
You got a few old brick buildings sitting around waiting to be revitalized, don't you? I got to imagine.
There's a few. In fact, I mean, a couple of restaurants, unfortunately, during this whole COVID thing, a couple of restaurants up and down the street have, closed up. So for good. So there's opportunity for somebody to come in there and fill that spot.
Well, that's turning a bad thing into maybe a good thing. So here's hoping, because it's a tragedy what happened to all the restaurants out there, but we had to do what we had to do. Jason, absolutely 90-degree turn, because I don't have any great setup in this. You've been doing so many cool live shows. You've been doing Go Ahead Caller. You've been doing, the Jason Falls show. You have a new show launching. I want you to talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So Go Ahead Caller started out as a Facebook Live, kind of like this, where I just kind of threw open the camera when Facebook Live first really started coming around. It's like, hey, I'm just getting ready for work. What are y'all doing today? It was really informal. And then I realized, well, wait a minute, people are coming to hear what I have to say. So let's kind of turn that into a live show. I did. And then about a year later, I turned it into a podcast. I would pull out the audio afterwards and post it as a podcast. And it eventually became the Jason Falls Show, a marketing podcast, because I didn't know what to name it. And I wanted it to be a marketing podcast, but I didn't want it to be that generic. So I just called it the Jason Falls Show. Well, over the course of the following year after that, up until now, I realized that this is an opportunity for Cornet to attract, attention, clients, et cetera, and for us to actually contribute some content out there as an agency to the greater marketing conversation. And so I had a couple of internal conversations with our president, Christy Heiler, and we're basically repackaging the Jason Falls Show, and it's going to be called Digging Deeper, Make Creativity Your Business Advantage. And that's kind of our sort of what we do here, our mantra. And so Christy is actually the first show of that brand, that Digging Deeper brand, is going to be tomorrow morning, actually, at 8 o'clock Eastern on Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn. And Christy Heiler, our company president, is going to be the first guest. We're not going to talk about Cornet. It's not a Cornet promotion, but I would love for people to get access to her brain, because she's been doing this for a couple of decades. She's incredibly smart, one of the most thoughtful and thorough strategists I've ever worked with. And so we're going to learn from her tomorrow morning. It's going to be fun.
I think it's a big time for everybody to get a chance to relearn some things too. We were just talking before we hit record that Kentucky is a little bit ahead of some places in getting ready to go. Like you're pretty much opened up now with a few safety precautions in place. Are you getting those calls? Are you getting calls from, prospects and or your existing clients saying, hey, look, we got to, we're in the hole like everybody else. Now what? What's it like? What's the conversation like?
Yeah, there's been probably about 3 categories of clients in this whole thing for agencies, I think. One is oh my God, I'm scared to death. Shut everything down. We can't spend any money. And we've had a couple of those. And then there have been others who are like, hey, this is probably going to be temporary. We can't afford to slow down. We're investing too much money. Hit the gas pedal, keep going, which has been nice for us. We've had most of our clients have been of that ilk. And then there are others who were like, well, we need to hire an agency or we want to do something, but this COVID thing, we're not really going to get started yet. And now they're coming back to the table with, okay, we feel this sense of urgency to try and capitalize on an opportunity. as consumers come back to retail locations, as they start going out more for tourism and things like that. We've got a couple of people who have come to the table and said, the time is now for us to really up our game and invest in things and be one of the businesses out there providing opportunities for consumers. So we've got a couple of new business, meetings in the next week or two that are businesses like that as well. So we've had a mix of all three. We've been very, very fortunate at Cornett to have enough clients who were of the mindset that we can't stop just because there's a shutdown. We're going to continue to work. So Cornett has continued to work, and we haven't had to lay anybody off or anything like that, COVID related. So knock on wood, that continues, and we continue to be able to do good work for great clients.
Story Warrior Jack Vincent, not to be confused with Story Leader Chris Brogan. Story Warrior Jack Vincent asked a question. Jason Falls, will you post that Facebook Live on creativity? I want to join. He's just asking, is this going to be a Facebook Live show?
It is. It's going to be Facebook Live, LinkedIn Live, and YouTube Live. Just look for me on those channels, and you'll follow me or whatever, and you'll get that LinkedIn Live notification or the Facebook Live notification when I go live. But yeah, just follow me on those channels. Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, I'll be there.
Now, I would be remiss in not bringing up what Carrie in the comments has pointed out, that you have a new book coming out, Winfluence. Am I right about that?
That is true. Yeah. So I just finished the manuscript a couple weeks ago and sent it off to Entrepreneur Press. Honored that they were excited enough about what I was doing to publish the book. And so Winfluence, the subtitle is Reframing Influencer Marketing to Ignite Your Business. And so our friend Neil Schaefer has a new book out called The Age of Influence. And I'm reading it now because he's going to be a guest on the show in a couple weeks. And so Neil takes a very sort of how-to practical step-by-step, here's how you do influencer marketing. My book has a little bit of that baked in, but it's much more of a, hey, we're thinking about influencer marketing wrong. We are using this word influencer, which has become a bad word, referring to, peace sign duck lips people on Instagram and YouTube. The same way that, we used to refer to bloggers in 2007 and 2008 as, oh, those are people that are just bitching about Comcast.
That's right.
So my argument in the book is we need to reframe how we think about influencer marketing and call it influence marketing. And it's much bigger than just social networks. It's also offline and things like that. So I go through, several different, versions of influence marketing and kind of help people understand how to look at it in a broader perspective.
You and I both have a appreciation for things like event marketing and experience marketing and that sort of thing. I'm assuming that's what you're saying when you bring that in. How does the offline, how do you help somebody kind of get to understand a little bit better what the offline part of that means?
Well, you have to remember that everybody has influence to a degree. I mean, Eric Deckers and I, in the first book that I wrote, 12 years ago or 10 years ago or 8 years ago, I don't even know, I've lost track of time, a long time ago, it was a while back. We talked about how his wife, Tony, convinced 3 different family members to buy Toyota RAV4s. So, wow. And she had no followers on social media at the time. She wasn't even involved in social media. So when we talk about influencers or people who have influence, we're talking about everybody. I mean, you can be influenced to buy something by overhearing a conversation in line at the grocery store. So we have to think about influence marketing from a much broader perspective. It's not just about online people. A perfect example, we had a brand video for the University of Kentucky healthcare folks, hospital system here in Central Kentucky, very competitive medical market. And we had a brand video that was this like 2-minute cinematographic, whatever that word is, beautiful display of what this, UK healthcare means to the community. It was called We Are Proof. And it was, a couple of different stories interwoven in this beautiful mini movie. Well, we had to figure out how to get people to watch it. And so, I can go get Chris Brogan to tweet about it. I can go get influential people online all day to talk about it. But what we really needed to do is we needed to get all the influential people in the Lexington community to do that. And that includes the mayor, and that includes the CEO of the Urban League, and that includes all these people who don't necessarily have big online presences. So we coordinated both online influencers and offline influencers. We asked them to go and watch the video at a certain window of time because we wanted to play with that Facebook algorithm. We had them comment, share their UK healthcare story. And Lexington's a community of about 325,000 people. And right now that video to date has a little over 850,000 views on Facebook. And it got that very quickly. We had 40,000 in the first 4 hours. And so that engineering of the algorithm to have everything happen recently and from people in this geographic footprint helped its organic, sort of virality, if you will. And we ended up winning a Shorty Award for that this year. So that's how online and offline sort of intermingle.
So your name cousin, Jason Croft, asks, do we need a new name for influencer?
In the book, I call them people of influence. I think influence, that word is key to it because it's influence marketing. But instead of identifying them with the shorthand influencer, I think it's people of influence, people who have influence. Because if you think about it that way, it's like, oh, your mind automatically draws back a little bit and goes, oh, you mean like my minister or my English teacher in high school or people, my mom, people who influence me, as opposed to this definition that we've somehow aggregated together in the online space. It's not about Instagrammers. It's about people who can persuade others to take action.
I was just thinking about the fact that we promised a little bit of shenanigans and we've been such grown-ups this whole time.
That's true.
I was really just thinking about that. I was just thinking, man, I got to think of some way to mess this up.
Well, how many times we've told the how we met story a bazillion times over the years. I'm sure there's some people who haven't heard it, but for most of the people I'm seeing in the stream, they probably have. I still think it's hysterical.
I'm gonna do it now, and you can fill in my blanks.
All right.
So, this story is like a humbling story because I think of everybody as absolutely my peer. And sometimes people, especially in the older days when I really was Chris Brogan, people wouldn't think that way. So Jason's like trying to think, I'm going to make a big impression on this guy because I haven't really met him and nobody really knows me yet. We're going to come to this event. I got to really do my thing. So he says, hey, my schoolmate or my roommate, my college roommate or something, Biff, goes by Biff, runs a bar. And you guys ought to come to this bar because Biff's going to hook us up, man. You got to go. It's going to be great. He's going to hook us up. And all I'm thinking is free liquor. And I get to hang out with this guy I haven't met in person yet. This is going to be great. So we all start wandering around. And this is like early Twitter. Like this is when you could just tweet, hey, where is this thing? And Twitter would answer you back. You didn't have to add anybody. And we're at the Planet Hollywood Mall in Vegas where my mom and dad live. And we're looking around. We can't find the place. And Jason had said it's between here and here. So we're walking. We keep going back and forth. I don't remember which of us figured it out first. We all just sort of looked over and went, it's one of those slushy bars. If you've never been to Vegas, you've never been to a slushy bar, you've never been to any party city in the world, it's those bars that have the rotating blenders like full of multicolored liquids. And Biff in my mind has morphed over the years into Gary Busey, young Gary Busey. In my mind, young Gary Busey, a lot of teeth, very blonde, very energetic. Guys, you guys got to be Jason's friends. Now, I have to say this because, this used to be a slightly embarrassing story for Jason in some ways, I think. But from the minute Biff saw us, he treated us like royalty. He was like, hey, come on over. We got some beverages to have. Now, the purpose of these slushy bars is to truly obliterate your senses as fast as you can. So they give you like a bong kind of thing full of slushy liquid. Yeah, Jason's leaning back to get their thing. And then Biff gets grabbing these shots, calling them like depth chargers or something. And he's flinging these shots in that, you're supposed to pick them back out. And then like that liquor's all going to go in there. Essentially one drink and someone of stature is going to have a rough time. Mm-hmm. We had more than one drink, I think.
Yeah.
What did I miss? What did I miss so far? Because I still haven't said my favorite part of the story.
So the only part that you missed that I think is highly relevant is I had never been to this bar before, and I only knew the name of it, but the picture I had in my mind was it's a big sports bar with big screen TVs, and we're going to get a steak and we're going to have dinner and it's going to be amazing and it's all on me. So I was promising this great night out, and we show up and it's a freaking slushy bar in between the Gap and the Limited in the mall. And I saw it, and like this look of horror fell over my face because like, oh, I'm about to disappoint all of these people. There were about 10 people with us, I guess, at the time. And then and Biff saw the look on my face, and he snapped in and was like, I'm gonna take care of it. We're just gonna get them all shitty drunk. And we did. It was great. We lost Mike McCallum that night, didn't we?
I was not going to name his name, but now that we did, I am going to name his name. Britt Rabel was there, and Glenn from Sony at the time. Mike McCallum had one or two of those beverages. Mike's a big guy. I'm 6'2". Mike's probably 6'4".
He had a couple drinks before we got there too.
Yeah, that might be true. He vanished. He full on vanished. I ended up I met my first hooker that night because I was walking into the Planet Hollywood bathrooms at the casinos.
Boy.
And this really attractive woman had a Batman shirt on because I'm an idiot. She put her hand right on my chest and said, "Hey, Batman, can I be your Robin?"
Lord.
And I was like, that is such a sweet offer, but I got to go find a friend. I think he might have died in a bathroom. I'll be back. And I went in the bathroom. So I'm really uncomfortable in a men's room anyway. Like, I'm sure that's when I'm going to get jumped. I watched that Mission Impossible with Henry Cavill. Like, that's going to be me. Yeah. Right. And I'm in there going, Mike. And I realized I'm yelling a man's name in a men's room. Like, nothing good's coming to this. He vanished for I don't remember how many days.
Wait. No. You missed something about the bathroom. You got down on the floor and looked under the stalls. I was there. I was like, dude, you can't do that. Get out of here. It was funny.
I did. I was on my hands and knees kind of looking under to see in case he passed out. I didn't want to say that part. Mike vanished for a few weeks or so off of everything. No Twitter, nothing. And then I got a very terse DM from Twitter. Don't ask me. Yeah. Don't want to talk about it. That was it.
We never have talked about it.
Nope.
I mean, he showed up at I think it was the 6th or 7th annual, because after that year we did them every year. And at the 6th or 7th annual, Mike shows up, and I was like, "Oh my God, it's Mike from the original story!"
Oh
and
my God.
And 2 or 3 people asked him. He's like, "No, I'm not going there. I'm not going to tell the story. What Jason and Chris have told is good enough."
It's a dream.
Here's a dream. And let me here's some influencer marketing, meat to that story. So the whole point was I needed to connect with Chris on a much more, sort of personal level, because Chris was somebody in the social media space, and I was trying to be somebody in the social media space. But I was also trying to be somebody in the social media space on behalf of my clients, like Maker's Mark and Jim Beam and all these others. And so from that point, when we had our drinks and we were plenty liquored up, lost half the people we were with, including Mike, Chris gets a text from someone and says, "Hey, some of my friends are across the street. Let's go over to the Mandalay Bay and hang out with them." I was like, "Great, that's awesome." So Chris Brogan, who was my number one target on a list of a bunch of influential people I wanted to connect with, takes me to his group of friends at the Mandalay Bay. And if I had a top 15 list of here's all the people I want to meet, we walked into this little shaded off table. They had this drape around the table, but it was a table for like 25 people. And so they had this drape around the table, and we walk in the little part in the drapes. And if I had a top 15 list, there was number 2, there was number 4, there was number 7, there was number 8, 9, 10, 12, 14. Everybody I wanted to meet was there. And so it was literally this one semi-embarrassing slushy mall bar moment took me from knowing one influencer that I wanted to meet to knowing almost all the influencers I wanted to meet at this particular event. And after that night, I became kind of in that crowd, which was really what I was aiming to do. So it worked out.
You were plugged right in. There's no no second phase.
And let me not to sugarcoat it or anything. I want to make sure everybody understands the ultimate reason. The first little tip of the iceberg was Chris making the introduction. The ultimate reason was that big table of 25 people or whatever. I paid the bar bill. So when you throw down on that much booze, people go, "Oh, he's my friend now."
They remember.
There you go.
That is a Pepperidge Farm moment, Vincent. Only because it's your birthday, buddy. I just saw a little bit of last night's dessert walk by this morning's breakfast. Nice. So that makes me think of I'm less proud of this story now, but I remember that time in the Austin airport when we stood next to that kid who had the "I'm a social media expert" shirt on. Yes. And we sort of all posed around him for the photo. And he didn't know a single one of us.
He didn't have any idea who we were. And I think it was Brogan, and I think maybe Brian Clark was there. And I don't remember who all was but it was like literal people who were considered social media experts were all standing around this kid with the shirt on. And he thought we were janitors at the high school or something. I don't know what he thought.
It was like a good 1/3 of the Mount Rushmore of all our idiot friends, that's for sure. And it was like this one kid with his "I'm a social media expert" shirt. We said, "That's just the best shirt." And he said, "Well, what was the other expert he said he was?" He had another shirt that said something else. He goes, "Well, I was going to wear that one, but glad I wore this one." Me too, buddy.
I don't know. That was fun times. My
It
goodness.
was. Well, funny that, Charles Taggart asked a question, when was this? I got to think about 08 or 09.
Yeah, it was that was the Vegas story was the first Blog World in
Blog World
Vegas
Expo.
in 08.
That's 08, yep.
Yep, that was 08.
Because that's also the one where Stelzner, did his hallway interviews and basically launched the social media marketing world.
I think that was the next year. I think he came in 09. Because there was 1 or 2 years that it was before he came along, because I remember I was one of his early like guest post bloggers on his stuff, and I had no earthly idea what he was doing, and I just was like, yeah, I'll write a guest post or two for you. And then he kind of blew up, and I was like, holy crap, this guy knows what he's doing. So,
oh my gosh, out of the blue, it felt like. I mean, he's a pretty smart guy and did a lot of good business, and I would say that he knew what he was doing, but we didn't all see it immediately. I do want to point out, though, I mean, the question and the sort of this was epic and all that. We all have this white in our beards now, and none of us are anybody anymore. There's all these purple and green haired kids now, and we're just kind of the old guys. Jack wrote us a book here. He says, great Chris Brogan story. And similarly, I was stage host at an event in Berlin, and because Chris was the big name, lots of my European top 15s were attending. Not only get to know Chris, but I got to know the other top folks.
Yeah.
I mean, what am I going to do? Hang on, guys. Just Jack and me. You got to connect everybody. That's what we do.
You were a big deal when the Twitters and the podcasting and stuff first started, and people flocked to you because you were sharing knowledge and you had influence. And so people who also wanted to develop influence or thought leadership positions or whatever, felt like they needed to connect with you because you had access to that audience. And that's what we did.
If you covered the tab a little bit, then you win.
Heck yeah. Hey, if you have a target out there that you want to really connect with, buy them drinks. It works a lot. Unless they don't drink, then don't buy them drinks. But do something like that. Buy them a coffee, buy them lunch, whatever. Sometimes it actually works out for you.
Way less successful in Utah. That's my tagline. Jason, you have done sportscasting in the past. You were actually known for that for a lot. You were the Jason Falls of sportscasting, is what I would say.
Well, I was in college PR, college athletics PR, and I happened to also, know how to be a broadcaster. So I got thrown into doing basketball and baseball play-by-play at Birmingham Southern College in Alabama for a while. I wasn't, Bob Costas or anything, but I did a lot of radio broadcasting, and I produced a TV show once upon a time that was all about sports highlights and stuff like that. So I have a weird background of stuff, but let's not inflate my ego any more than it needs to be.
Oh no, I like to, I've put it up there and say that, he was pretty much the voice of the South.
Not sure if I'd be proud of that, dude.
Well, there is that. And you brought some of that into who you are, and you're making these shows, and you and I are on a very parallel path right now as far as some of that goes. I mean, with Carrie's husband Dan making all these graphics and all that kind of stuff. I mean, I'm stepping up my game a little bit, and you've decided to do that same. What was your turning point? What made you think, wait a minute, like I've just been fudging on this, I got to really get into it? What was a change in your heart and your mind? It
was really gradual. I mean, like I said, when the original version of my current, podcast / live stream started, it was Facebook Live had just really become a thing, and I was wanting to experiment with it. So I had a chiropractor's appointment really early on Tuesday mornings. And so I got into the office an hour before anybody else. So I just threw open Facebook Live and said, hey, what are y'all doing today? What's going on? Here's what I'm working on. And that evolved into, hey, I've got something I want to tell you about. Kind of an old blog post or an idea like an old blog post idea would pop in my head. And instead of writing a blog, I'd turn on Facebook Live and say, hey, what do you think about this? Da, 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 da. And people would go back and forth with me, much like they're doing here. And then it, after a few weeks, I was like, you know what, this is a show. I need to like write this and put some more thought into it and give it a title and make it, do some intro music. And so it was just that old broadcaster in the back of my head kept saying, dude, quit fudging around with this and actually make it real. And I did. And it's evolved, over the course of a year. I'm like, wait a minute, I got to rip out the audio and do an actual podcast. So I did that. And then now, obviously, we've sort of said we want to reposition this thing to be a megaphone for Cornette's perspective on creativity and how we make creativity your business advantage. And so, part of my job at Cornette is new business and all that good stuff. So it's an opportunity for us to have a voice out there, not just Jason Falls. And since I met you back in the Vegas days in 2007, 2008 and whatnot, I have gradually moved away as I've gotten older and all these gray hairs have come in. I've gradually gotten away from it being about me. And now I want it to be about Cornette. I want it to be about the work. I don't even want my name in the title of the show. And so it's just evolved into something different now.
Well, so it's funny you say that, because I was just going to say, I didn't evolve as far as you did, because I really still want my name on the show. I guess also I don't work at an agency, but it's mine. But I think, there's a difference when the minute you start to really see it as a show, and the other show was a show as well. But the minute you start to see it as a show, you put a lot of different kind of energy into it, different sentiment into it. You structure it a bit. And I think that when we think it's sort of fun and games, it's like what all of our evolution of blogging, right? This is that again. You go from sort of that fun and games mindset to suddenly realizing, if I'm going to make this that someone's going to want to stay here and stay with us for some duration, I got to do these things to make that true. Is that what you've seen as well?
Yeah, it is. And it's if you have any training as a writer, or, if you watch how other people craft and create their content, whether it's video or, a podcast, radio show, or even, the old blog posts and whatnot. Like I go back to Carrie actually mentioned earlier in the thread that I used to write a humor column called Falls Off the Rocker for my local hometown newspaper years ago. And that column had I had a format, like it was, I had a catchy title and then I had a little opinion piece. But at the end, I actually made fun of one of the other columnists in the newspaper who always had this disclaimer that so-and-so is a local attorney and his opinions and blah, 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 blah. And I just thought it was obnoxious. So I made fun of it. But I would change that every week to say, like, if the topic that week were about, racism or something like that, I would, which I never made fun of racism, obviously, but if I ever did something that was that related, the little disclaimer changed and had a little punchline in it that, kind of made it kick. So I had this format, this style of how I wrote. When I went to blogging, it was the same kind of thing. And we think about it in terms of SEO terms. When it's online, it's like, okay, you have to have title tags and you need to have keywords in the titles and you have to have sections and you need bulleted lists and all that kind of stuff. So the podcast and the show, the live stream show, is the same thing for me. I have a little intro. I do a little sponsor thing because Switcher Studio does a great job of helping me make them look professional. And then I do this interview and I have kind of a system of how I ask questions. And then I have a couple of segments at the end where I can talk about other things. And so it's just a pattern. I've got a little shell. I write all my notes for the week, and that's how it works. And because I feel like, to your point, it's a show, not just me goofing off on Facebook, I'm putting a lot more, sort of care in making it presentable.
Okay, Harold.
So, yeah.
I went from accidentally muted to not unmuted the wrong time. That's how good a showmaker I am, Jason Falls. Listen, and I don't want to bore people to death, but I just got to ask, what's like, what did you decide on a length for the new show? Is it a half hour? Is it a little more? What'd you go with?
It's really the same show. We're just changing kind of the branding and the name of it. It's anywhere from 25 to 45 minutes.
Okay, so it's like mine. It's got a start time, but it doesn't have any kind of guess of an end.
Right. And if we ever get to a point where somebody wants to pay me a lot of money to put it in a package and put it on a network, fine, I will. But for now, it's just me having a fun conversation, trying to learn from whoever the guest is, throwing in a few peppery thoughts on the end of it, and then we're all good.
I and a lot of other people got a little bit jumpy when John Krasinski told everybody he sold his Some Good News to the networks, and he made it a CBS All Access show. A lot of people got pretty grumpy about that one. I did too. But Ketchup's totally for sale. Anyone can come buy it. No one's going to want it because I'm catching up with my friends, but could happen someday. Jason, comedy writing and comedy in general. I have laughed many times with you or reading you to the point of tears. And I've watched your show and laughed to the point that I really shouldn't have been in the coffee shop anymore. What's the secret that you tell people to making something funny? Or how have you developed your creative and comedic wit?
Wow. To me, it's really, I can sit down and try to craft a funny story or write a joke and a punchline. And every now and then I do that, but I'm not a stand-up comedian, so that's not my habit. Most of my humor comes in either injecting it in something I'm writing, a blog post or, my books or some longer script for a show. but beyond that, it's really just my personality. Like I'm a sarcastic SOB, and I'm going to be smart assed, and I'm going to make some clever comment and some snappy one liner. Now, a lot of times because I am sarcastic, people sort of, especially people I work with, are like, you're very negative, and sometimes you can be mean spirited. And that's true, but it's not my intent. My intent is always to just lighten the mood and make it fun. More often than not, though, that leads me to stepping in it and having to apologize from time to time. And I've learned over the years, I'm just going to have to do that because this is me. This is my sense of humor. I've started to put up a lot more guardrails now than I had 10, 15 years ago because the world's changed and people are much more sensitive about things. My sense of humor 15 years ago is not my sense of humor now. But I'm always constantly just trying to lighten the mood a little bit, make people laugh about it while they're learning, while they're thinking about serious things. Let's give them a chuckle too, because that I think helps them sort of remember it and appreciate the experience a little bit more.
Who are some of your comic writing or comedic writing heroes? I got to imagine you'd have been a Dave Barry guy. Who else was kind of in that pantheon, so to speak? Anybody else come to mind?
I think Dave Barry was probably first for me because remember when I was growing up, or I don't know if you knew this or not, but when I was growing up, my mother was the local newspaper editor. And so, print journalism and newspapers were big for me. And he was a newspaper columnist. So originally it was Dave Barry and Louis Grizzard. And then that evolved into Hunter S. Thompson, P.J. O'Rourke, and that evolved into, novelists, the Tim Dorseys, the Carl Hyacinthes of the world. And then I really, really love Christopher Moore. He's crazy, and I love his books. And so that's sort of where I am entertained when I want to go read something. But I think a lot of my sensibilities come from that Dave Barry sort of pattern of just being silly and goofy, but I probably added a little 4-letter word edge to what he does over the years. I think is probably better. My mom always said, "You're Dave Barry, but you're not decent." So that's kind of how she's always described to me, which is amazing because I got away with writing a newspaper column in the newspaper that she used to be the editor of in a small town in the Bible Belt. I got away with it, so I don't know why she didn't think I was decent, but whatever.
It's really a feat if you think about all those things stacked against you in that way. Bible Belt humor is not exactly the easiest to land. You got to kind of pull that old Bill Cosby. Don't cuss.
This is I don't mean to interrupt you, but I got to share this with you. One of the columns that I wrote it was actually a reaction to a news report, which I'll get into in a second, but that lit everyone up. And most people were laughing at it and thought it was absolutely hysterical. But there was this segment of the community in Pikeville, Kentucky that were like, okay, you got to take him out of the newspaper. That's inappropriate. I'm a Christian. I don't want to hear these things in my newspaper. So there was a preacher, a minister in a small town in Virginia, just across the border from Kentucky, who had come out with this big campaign to shut down a nightclub in his town because it allowed dancing, which he thought was unchristian-like or something. And so that was just fodder for me to just go after. The name of the town in Virginia was Pound. And so the headline of my column was Minister discourages people from pounding Virginia or something like that. And I just kind of went with it, and it was really, really funny. And got in a lot of trouble for that one, but it was funny.
Sometimes it's better to suffer the slings and arrows. I'm just going to answer that, call it a fluke, but I don't know what your favorite Christopher Moore first book to recommend would be.
Oh my goodness. Jack Vincent. That's a hell of a question. Probably, I think my favorite Christopher Moore book is The Lust Lizard of Melancholy Cove. I've read it 2 or 3 times. I just think it's hysterical. But for those of you who really want to get into Christopher Moore and kind of see how amazingly brilliant he can be, the book Lamb is probably his best book. And it's, there's April Dawn jumping up with Lamb. Lamb is essentially sort of an explanation of what happened between age 13 and age 30 for Jesus Christ. And it's irreverent, but it's absolutely hysterical and witty and fun. So those are my 2.
This coming into the charts, Jason was also once a radio DJ. My mom and dad were DJs. That's how they met, by the way. So you're in good company.
I was. I was DJing at age 14. All my friends had goofy, geeky jobs at the convenience store, the movie theater, and I wanted something cool. So I marched my ass into the radio station and said, "I want to be a disc jockey." And they said, "Here, read some news copy into this microphone." And I did. And they were like, "Okay, you can start Friday." So,
you're in.
and I, of course, back then I did my best radio DJ impersonation. And I did that for the first couple of weeks. And then we had this really, slow drawl Southern guy, Scotty was our engineer, who taught me everything I needed to know about radio. And he turned to me one day and he said, "Jason, you're going to sound a hell of a lot better on the radio if you stop faking it and just learn to use your own voice." And that was it. So I started becoming me at that point.
And away we went.
Thank you, Scotty.
I don't know if you ever read the book or saw the speech about it. Les Brown's "Live Your Dreams," talking about how he got to be a DJ. He was talking about he was labeled in school. He was labeled educably mentally retarded, which isn't anything anyone can get labeled anymore. But they basically said, "You're a stupid idiot and you can't be taught. So you might as well hang out in the stupid room and just don't do anything, and we'll let you get through school. Just don't talk to anybody." That didn't work so well for him. He was a bit of a rabble rouser. But then as he started to get a little older, he said he wanted to be a DJ. And so he went and worked at this place, and they basically made him like mop floors and empty trash cans and that sort of thing. And he goes, and it was one Sunday, and the DJ on air had been drinking. And all this Les Brown kept saying was just, "Drink, baby, drink." Keep going. And it was clear that he was slurring and he was missing his cues and he was letting the same song play over and over again. And the phone board lights up and the boss is like, "Go call every DJ." Les said, "Okay." So I hung up and I just waited about a good 5 minutes and called him back, said no one answered. He said, "Well, do you know how to do anything?" He goes, "I'm it."
Man,
he went on the air and he did that kind of awesome urban, I think it was Detroit disco DJ, cool patter and flash, like that kind of DJ. And that was his first big break in life.
That's awesome. I remember another time that I got in trouble. This one was on the radio, not the newspaper. I kind of burned down the media in Pikeville before I left. But it was April 1st, and I was a disc jockey on WDHR, which was an acronym that stood for We're Down Home Radio. And so on April 1st, I had the 6 a.m. shift one day. It was a Sunday. One year, and I opened up the show at 6 o'clock where I was supposed to play gospel music for an hour and then lead into the preachers that came in and rented the studio. And so I opened up the mic at 6 o'clock in the morning and said, "Ladies and gentlemen, we have a programming change to announce to you here on We're Down Home Radio, WDHR. From now on, we dig hard rock." Rah! And then I played like 60 seconds of a Metallica song or something. Oh boy. Yeah, I got my butt chewed on that one. That was fun.
Wow. There were a lot of curlers falling out of a lot of hair at one time, I imagine, in that moment.
Yeah, I don't think anybody prayed for me that day. It was run that boy out of town that day.
Local jewelry stores' phones were ringing off the hook for extra pearls so people could clutch them.
Exactly.
My golly. So let's pretend you have a son who's the age that he's starting to do driving lessons. I saw that video. Let's pretend you got a daughter, that age as well. You've got, our kids are about similar age. They are getting ready to figure out who they want to be when they grow up and all that sort of thing. What's different in the advice that you got versus the advice you're going to give?
Wow. I don't think I got advice. I think that was my problem. And I say that, kind of almost jokingly, but I think, my mother and my stepdad were so big. I was 11 years old when my brother and sister were born. They were twins. And so I went from being the only grandchild to being, who's that teenager that lives here now? I don't understand who that guy is. So I was kind of on my own from a very early age, not in a neglect, perspective, but just I had to be. And, my mom loved me and my stepdad loved me and my dad, lived elsewhere, but he loved me too. And so I was, raised the way I was raised, but I was kind of a self-starter and on my own anyway. And so I didn't have a lot of guidance or a lot of advice. And even if my mother had tried to give it to me, I would have refused it because I just I'm doing it my own way. With Grant and Katie, I've been very careful to say, hey, here's what you need to know. Here's, how you should attack the world, in my opinion, but it's your world. You have to make your own decisions, but I'm here for you if you need to bounce stuff off of. So I've tried to be encouraging, but not, hands-on, because I don't want them to hate me. And I think if I'm too overbearing on them and try to make them too much like me, they're not going to want to be around me at all. And so my relationship with them is probably the most precious thing in the world to me. So I'm very kid gloves with how I handle them. And even when, Grant's, the last couple of years gotten in a little bit of trouble here and there, I've been very stern, but every conversation always ends with a big hug and I love you and I'm here for you, that kind of thing. So, I think the difference is that I'm more involved and they're not as independent as I was at that age. So it's a little different situation.
That's an interesting detail. I think that's probably true here too. I don't usually ever invite my parents to tell stories about my childhood because there's a lot of crazy insanity that happened that they'd find me in really weird positions, like, diving 30 some odd feet into a pile of hay, only to find the fork and the big giant butcher knife we used to cut all those bales open, not realizing maybe don't cut someone else's hail bays open to jump in them. Those kinds of stories, crawling underground in a culvert, like a rain culvert, 40 or so feet under the ground, because, why wouldn't you do that? Like a wizard. My children did not pick that path growing up. So you're right. I mean, it's a very different upbringing. It's also interesting, isn't it, to think about what you and I thought maybe we wanted to be when we grew up, when we were, we didn't have these, versus what our kids can do when they grow up. It's got to be crazy to imagine that for a minute.
Yeah. And when you just look at the opportunity, my son is 15 years old and has a rap single on iTunes available for download. Like the technology, the ability to produce content and monetize it in some way.
Wait. What's his rap name?
His rap name is 502 Phenomenon.
That's a really good name. I was expecting to want to make fun of it.
No, it's 502 Phenomenon. He's working on his first.
As you are.
He's working on his first EP. Should come out probably in the next 6 months or so. He's been tinkering with it, but yeah, he's got a thing on iTunes and he's got several songs on SoundCloud. And the fact that a 15-year-old, like when I was 15, I was working at the radio station, so I was enterprising, I was entrepreneurial. But the fact that he's gone out and created something that's completely his own, not for someone else, that could potentially eventually one day be a nice revenue stream for him, blows my mind. And so the good fortune that I have is that, and that you and I both have, is that we're in this media production, content creation world, and we can sort of give advice to them on how they could potentially use it. And I hurt for the parents who don't get it, who don't understand the world that our kids are in right now. I don't worry as much as they probably do because I understand the technology and how to manage it, but I feel for the parents who can't. But yeah, Grant's got that. And my daughter has a YouTube channel called KT, the word or the letters KT Reads, KT Reads, where she reviews young author books. And so it's like they're entrepreneurial, creating their content, trying to build their platforms for the future. And I just marvel at their ingenuity and their ability to do that, because I would never have thought to do anything like that, even if I had the technology, I think, at my age or at that age.
She did one. I'm just trying to think when it was. Oh, I watched her 4 books in 24 hours. I thought, man, she's kicking it. Like, she's just like, she's coming up with content. I've been sort of, I might be one of the only people doing this. I've been really pooping on all the Jimmy Jameses out there who used to be late night shows and who are now like, idiots at their house. And I think they got to watch people like Katie, because they're not going to know what to do unless they watch what the other folk are making happen.
Well, I mean, you look at, Lily Singh, I guess, is a great example of someone who is just an online content creator, and now she's hosting a late night talk show on a network. I mean, the power that we have as content creators and producers, that everybody has, the ability anyway that we have, is there for us. The good and the bad with content creation and social media platforms like this are everybody can create the content. That's good. The bad news is everybody tries to create content and most of it sucks. It's the ones that don't that are going to stand out. And so my hope as a parent is to just sort of fan the flames of what they're doing that's good, so that they learn, here's the difference between really good engaging content and content that's kind of meh. And so, Katie's 12, so I'm not not messing with a fragile ego with what she's doing right now. But as she gets older and more experienced, I'll give her a little nudge here, a little tip there. Hey, you might want to include a couple of keywords in that headline. Hey, you might want to do this, So I'm trying to kind of push her in the right direction without being, again, too overbearing.
Imagine that she's got a pop who can show her the way, as opposed to however many parents are saying, get off that stupid YouTube, you weirdos. I didn't go looking before my interview. I didn't do enough research, Jason Falls, but I'm going to guess you are not doing a lot of the famous dances on TikTok. Is that accurate?
No, hell no. I think my first 8 posts on TikTok to just experiment with the platform were, because I saw TikTok originally as, well, everybody's just lip syncing other people's crap here. What is this? I don't understand. And so my first 8 posts where I would play a song that was a popular lip sync song that day and just look at the camera and go, I'm not going to use this the way you want me to use it. I'm not going to do it. And I'm not doing any of the dances. Katie had me do one dance move, which wasn't even a dance move. It was just like at a restaurant one time on her TikTok. And she said, how many followers do I need to get for you before you'll do the whole renegade dance or whatever the hell it was? And I said, 1,000. You get 1,000 followers, I'll do the renegade dance. And I think I've got 52 or something like that because I'm just not creating content there. But
thank goodness.
Yeah, that's not me.
One of our viewers who may or may not still be here, Carol and her daughter Lila, have been doing some TikTok dances, and I laugh about it. I appreciate watching Carol dance. It's just never going to be me. Never. I can't dance well with nobody watching, let alone a video camera watching. So we're going to say no to that. Jason, rest of 2020. What's the prognosis in your mind?
Well, I think right now it's still wait and see, but we're back to a point where a lot of states and a lot of cities are sort of opening back up. And I'm modestly concerned that Kentucky, by the way, restaurants have been back open for a couple of weeks now. And the incubation period's a couple of weeks for the COVID-19 virus. So I'm worried that this and next week we're going to see another outbreak and might have to kind of recall everybody back in. If that doesn't happen, knock on wood, it doesn't, and we slowly and gradually get back to whatever normal is going to be now, it's certainly not going to be the same thing. I think we're just going to have to adjust how we market, how we look at consumer behavior, what consumers do, where they go. We've got a lot of travel tourism clients here, so we're constantly monitoring what people are doing and where are the concerns and are they going far from home? Are they not? That kind of thing. And so I think we're just having to reteach ourselves a new set of consumer behavior. And I think anybody who advises clients has to do that. You can't assume that the way it used to be is going to be the way it's going to be. You have to focus on the new issues that face consumers today. And I think there's a strikingly large element of concern and fear for their health and their safety that is just going to change the way they think about where they go, where they shop, what they buy, who they buy it from, whether or not you need to focus on e-commerce versus retail, et cetera. So I think we just have to stop, take a couple steps back and rethink all of our marketing plans for all of our businesses because they change.
That really attractive man right there is Jason Falls. I'm Chris Brogan. I'm so glad you came and hung out. Yeah, it takes me a little while. I had to practice. But,
hey, that's Chris over there.
But then I'm off screen, so now I have to do like this, eh?
Yeah, whatever.
Any one of these days, I'll get it. I can get right up my nose, though. Two tries.
Please don't.
Carrie says people can't wait to travel again as soon as it's safe. I think there's going to be a resurgence, but airlines are going to have to keep cleaning more. No more dirty tray tables. My gosh, think about what we all thought about getting on an airplane before a massive pandemic, about how it always looked like the inside of someone's sock.
The airline that opens up, that changes their business model and has seats that are 6 feet apart and gives people elbow room is the airline of the future. That's the one that's going to win all of our dollars.
Meanwhile, they've been shrinking the seats as fatter and fatter as we Americans keep getting. They're pushing those seats closer together to get more on.
Yeah, it's crazy. It's kind of like the airlines saw what food service and food industry people like Little Debbie and shit were doing, and we're like, well, let's just make them pay for that behavior. And now we get to sit in this wide, which that's just barely wider than my head, much less my butt. So,
good Lordy, you always get to meet your neighbors though. Jason Falls, such a pleasure. Thank you so much for being on. Thanks for catching up with me.
I'm glad to be here, man. Thanks for having me.
All right, I'm hitting the button. That means everybody else go away. Good talking to you.